We're very excited to see what they can do in the future. One very important topic when it comes to the development of AI models is also the not so exciting topic, or at least it doesn't sound so exciting, of standards. But I have two great guests here today with me who will show you that standards are actually super important, especially when you look at coming regulation for AI and data in the context of AI models. So I have Ralf Banisch here with me from Mindpeak, who's an applied mathematician and in his PhD, I think, got familiar with machine learning, and Joachim Lonien, head of business development of DIN, Deutsches Institut für Normen. Welcome you too, and I think you can have a seat. Der Klicker ist da oben.
Are we going to do this? Okay, I guess like that. I think you need this. Hello. Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. I know it's lunchtime and it's a talk about standardization. There are at least two reasons for you to get up and leave. So thank you for being here. Thank you for staying. Unfortunately, we do not have too many slides. We do not have too many jokes because this is a very serious topic about AI. It's medical diagnosis, or AI-assisted medical diagnosis, I should say. Before turning to Ralf, because he really knows this stuff and he can really talk about it professionally, I would like to say just a couple of words about standardization in general. You may have heard about ISO standards, international standards, so I just want to give a brief introduction into how these standards come about and what's the developmental process and how we came to developing a standard for and with Mindpeak. So ISO standards are usually developed in large technical committees that have about 20 or 30 countries, sometimes 50 countries. There's an AI committee at ISO that has 50-something countries in it. So you can imagine that it takes about 3 years to develop and publish one single technical standard on any issue you might want to think about, like if it's, Windows, lighting technologies, whatever it is, it's covered at ISO, and it takes about 3 years to publish one of those standards just because there's so many people coming together, so many different opinions, so it always takes a while to sort everything out. Which is why we have, at DIN is, by the way, the national standardization body represented at ISO, we have developed an expedited way to develop standards. It takes as little as 3 months to develop one single standard on any single issue that you might want to address. And this is what we did with Mindpeak, and we want to talk about that later. We have a brief video of what this is all about. But since this is an AI conference, I should probably talk about the AI Act that is being developed by the European Commission right now. Attached to the AI Act is a legislative framework that also talks about mandatory standards covering all kinds of AI topics like robustness and comprehensibility, and what else do we have? Trustworthiness, transparency, and all that stuff. It's going to take another 2 years at least before those standards are being published. But once they're published, they're mandatory, and they're trying to develop those standards in a way that they're more of a general standard, so that they're applicable across industries. What we did with Mindpeak was we took the use case, the specific use case that Mindpeak has and the business model that Mindpeak has, and we identified the challenges that they were experiencing and put those challenges and the way they're dealing with it into the standards in order to overcome those challenges. It took, I'm not sure, maybe 6 months. I believe Ralf knows, so we'll ask him later. A couple of months to do this, to publish it. And I think we should probably show the video, because then we will get a better idea of what the technology is all about and what the standard is all about. And then I will have a couple of questions for Ralf.
Wir leben mitten im Zeitalter der Digitalisierung. Ein wichtiger Treiber ist künstliche Intelligenz. Die Einsatzmöglichkeiten für KI sind unbegrenzt und bieten große Chancen, aber auch Risiken. Hier kommt das Deutsche Institut für Normung, kurz DIN, ins Spiel. Denn Normen und Standards schaffen unter anderem Vertrauen in neue Technologien und helfen neuen Ideen auf den Markt. Das wollen wir an einem Beispiel erläutern. In der Medizin unterstützt KI unter anderem bei der Erkennung von Krebserkrankungen. Bislang wird in der Pathologie viel Zeit auf die Beurteilung von Gewebeproben am Mikroskop verwendet. KI-Anwendungen können auf Basis mehrerer Millionen digitaler Aufnahmen dieser Proben darauf trainiert werden, Gewebeveränderungen zu erkennen. Sie können somit das medizinische Personal von monotonen Routinetätigkeiten entlasten. Das Ergebnis dieser Analyse ist zunächst eine zweite unabhängige Meinung. Die Interpretation des Ergebnisses liegt bei den Fachleuten. Sie beurteilen, ob ein Mensch Krebs hat und entwickeln die geeignete Therapie. Da es um Menschenleben geht, müssen strenge Anforderungen an die Zuverlässigkeit der KI-Anwendung und die Qualität der Ergebnisse erfüllt werden. Hier kommen Normen und Standards ins Spiel. Diese können definieren, dass die KI-Anwendung mit ausgewogenen Daten trainiert wird, etwa im Hinblick auf Alter oder Geschlecht. In der Folge liefert die KI verlässliche Ergebnisse, die niemanden benachteiligen. Die Einhaltung solcher Normen und Standards sorgt dafür, dass Ärztinnen oder Ärzte und Patientinnen oder Patienten der KI-Anwendung vertrauen können. Wie werden Normen und Standards in der Praxis entwickelt? DIN steuert den Prozess der Erstellung. Inhaltlich erarbeitet werden die Normen und Standards von Wirtschaft, öffentlicher Hand, Wissenschaft und Zivilgesellschaft. In unserem Beispiel also etwa medizinisches Personal, KI-Fachleute, Hersteller, Krankenkassen und Patientenvertretungen. Sie bringen ihre unterschiedlichen Interessen in den Entwicklungsprozess ein. Eine Norm kann Grundlage für eine Zertifizierung sein. Durch eine Zertifizierung wird geprüft und bestätigt, dass alle Anforderungen eingehalten werden. Normen und Standards werden dafür sorgen, dass KI-Systeme in Zukunft sicher und verlässlich für uns arbeiten. Werden Normen und Standards bereits in einem frühen Entwicklungsstadium einer Technologie mitgedacht, helfen sie dabei, innovative Ideen weltweit zu verbreiten und sicher in die Anwendung zu überführen.
Okay, let's see if this works. It does. So, Ralf, my first question, obviously, how did you come up with the idea of introducing AI into the medical diagnosis?
Okay, so thank you, Joachim. Yeah, I'm uniquely equipped with answering this question because I wasn't there when the idea was created. but okay, so I can tell you the story, of course. And it's not my story, it's the story of our founder, Felix Faber, but I'll do my best anyway. So yeah, one day Felix got a call from one of his very good friends, old friends that he hadn't heard from in years. They end up spending the weekend together, and just before leaving, the friend casually tells him, hey, by the way, I have terminal prostate cancer. Okay, and then Felix thought, okay, wow, this was not a coincidence. This was actually my friend saying goodbye to me. Yeah? And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, he passed away. And what you have to know with prostate cancer, as with many other cancers, is that the time of diagnosis is really key. So if it's diagnosed early, your prognosis is very good. If it's diagnosed late, your prognosis is very bad. So Felix had these questions that I think we all would have, right? Was my friend treated well? Could he have had a better treatment? Could he have had a better diagnosis? And when you do the research into the topic, you find out that the people doing this diagnosis, the pathologists, well, I mean, it's a very hard task, right? So they look at these tissue samples. I'm going to show you one here. So this is what they look at. This is an H&E slide of, in this case, lymph node tissue. Such a slide has tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of cells. The target structures are small, so there's a tumor nest sort of encircled in red there. And it requires years of training to do this. It's done typically with technology that's 100 years old, like a light microscope and your eyes, basically. And it's done under enormous time pressure. So within minutes, half an hour, they have to do this, they have to write the report. So there was a need for automation and frankly a need for help. And so that's why we then set out to develop an AI that automates this laborious task and identifies here the tumor cells and classifies them.
So how many slides does a doctor usually look at in order to do the analysis?
That depends. So typically, they will get their sort of case with something like 5 to 10 slides with different stainings, and they will go through it really lightning fast. I watched it once. They will look at one with this staining, then say, okay, now I have to look at this one, tuck, 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 really quickly, and then while looking at it, they will speak into their dictator system.
Like a tape recorder.
Like a tape recorder, exactly, to sort of write the report. They will even use shortcuts in order to be faster with the tape recorder. So they will say Textbaustein 2113 and stuff like this.
Wow.
Yeah.
So earlier today we heard somebody say that 75% or some, like the vast majority of AI ideas in industry and startups fail because they fail to scale. What are your challenges, and what were your challenges?
Yeah, so I think let me break it down into two aspects, right? So there's one challenge for me, the maker, the data scientist, right? So making something that works. And then there's the other challenge, the business challenge of once, well, you think you have something that works, of letting the market know about it, right? And convincing it. So for the second part, I mean, it's about trust. It's about generating trust. It's about like building a brand, let's say. And also, it's in our case, what we found surprising is we had to overcome some institutional bias. Let me show you a slide here. So this slide is about a Swedish oversight body that did a large study from all the laboratories in Sweden. So on the x-axis, you have the laboratories. On the y-axis, you have a score of a particular diagnosis. It's called Chi-67 positivity. The dotted line is the treatment decision. If you're above the dotted line, you will get the drug. If you're below, you will not get the drug. And what this slide really tells you is if you're a patient and you go to Malmö, which is on the far right, then most likely you are going to get a score somewhere around 30%, because in the past, that is what Malmö has scored its patients with. So you will be eligible for the drug. If you go to Karlskrona all the way on the left, your score will probably be around, like 18%, just because you went to Karlskrona, and so you will not be eligible for the drug. That's unwanted institutional bias, and I mean, I should say that once finding this out, the Swedish oversight body, they were not sitting idle on this. They changed the guidelines in the meantime to try to remove this. Why is this there? It's there because there is, a lack of standards actually in the diagnosis itself. There is no AI here yet. This is clinical routine, but pathologists have guidelines, but there's room for interpretation. There's room for, deciding where to look at and stuff like this. And when we now enter this market with our AI, which is not going to have this institutional bias, right? We go to Malmö. Malmö is telling us you are too sensitive. We go to Karlskrona. Karlskrona is telling us you are too insensitive, right? So the reality is different once you have the bigger picture, but you have to convince people about it, and that's sometimes challenging. For the other part, for creating the tool in the first place, I mean, the biggest challenge is actually that, well, how do we work as data scientists? We work in a lab environment, right? That controls, it's a controlled environment. It's in particular a controlled data environment that's necessary because we have to establish causal relationships between cause and effect empirically, right? So we have to do that. And then there comes the time when you take your model that works well in that lab environment and you generalize it, you apply it in the real world, you go to the lab next door, slightly different data, and you see a performance drop. You develop an imaging system for self-driving cars, you train it on data from sunny California, you take it to Norway, where there's snow, there's fog, there's rain, the street signs look different, the roads look different, there's a performance drop. So I think that's a core challenge, that generalization challenge that we all have to solve. And in our case, it's a bit stark because it turns out that there's a big variability in what images you get from different labs, because the processes to generate these images, to stain them, to cut them, and to scan them, there are manual steps, there are different scanners on the market, all that stuff. So this is what we have to deal with, and we have to be able to deliver consistent results, in all these different environments.
But so consistent results based on inconsistent raw material?
Yes. Well, not necessarily inconsistent, but a huge variability of raw material, let's say.
Okay, so how do you measure replicability if you have like great varieties of raw material? I mean, can you measure it?
We measure performance on the different data sources. Replicability, I guess, is replicability in the sense of robustness is, of course, something that is important. So if you get images that look very similar, that are only different in aspects that a human decision maker would consider insignificant, then it is important that also our AI makes the same decision on those images, that we're robust against these sort of adversarial attacks, if you will.
Okay, so so you're saying a doctor usually looks at 5 slides. What's the training data set? I mean, how many? Can you talk about a number of like how many data images your AI is trained on?
So in terms of number of images, it's difficult because our images are gigantic. They're gigapixels in size. So in terms of number of images, the number sounds small, but if I translate it into number of pixels, for example, then we are looking at something like, 5 times, 10 times COCO. I guess COCO is something that most of you will be familiar with. It's this publicly available data set for object detection.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what were the key, I guess, steps along the procedure that you wanted to have covered in a standard?
So I would say if you have a data science project, maybe there are 3 phases. Design, then model development, and then operation. For operation, you can go with your software best practices, I would say. So what we were looking at was writing up best practices for these first 2 phases, design and model development. So one thing, for example, that is very important when you define a use case for a data science product is that includes a data domain, okay, that you should try to define precisely. And then you need to collect data. You need to make sure that it is representative for your data domain.
Data domain meaning one specific type of tissue?
In our case, yes, one specific type of tissue, maybe from a specific organ, maybe stained, with a specific stainer. And then we try to cover the greatest amount of variability within that domain. So we look at data from different labs, from different time frames, and so on and so forth.
So when you wrote the standard, did you work with other companies, competitors, labs, doctors, patients? Who was involved in this?
Yeah, we worked with, there's the Hamburg AI Health Club. We worked with them and associated companies. There were 3 other associated companies, Psiori, Fuse AI, and DPV, and DIN, of course.
Is it a very competitive field? How many, I mean, do you have, I'm assuming you have competitors. Is there like a competitive advantage that you were gaining from this? And what does the market look like? Okay, so let's go here. This is kind of the competitor landscape. This is not created by us. This is from a blog. And the size of the blob here is how many partnerships you have. So we're very happy that we're the 2nd largest blob. And it's kind of a field where you have your hardware providers like Roche and so on and so forth that make the scanners, also making AI. And then you have dedicated tech companies like us. I would say what is our unique selling point maybe is that we have the most advanced single cell analysis AI. So when it comes about really detecting and classifying each single cell, and we're probably the most robust out of the box. Oh wow! So what was the reaction from your customers or doctors? I mean, do you feel any reaction or advantage after releasing this or writing this?
Yeah, I mean, so we show, of course, the fact that we do follow and develop this DIN standard to every potential customer, to every potential investor. We are currently looking for investors, by the way. And they like it. I mean, the thing is that if you're like Roche or some similarly big company, you probably already have brand recognition. It's a bit easier for you to generate trust. But for a smaller company like us, we're around 25 people, we're 5 years old. we only have the option to either build that through time and having a good product, and I mean that works, but it does take time, or through something like this, right? Certification and being able to show that we follow good procedures.
Excellent. We have a couple seconds left. Let me finish with this. What's ahead for Mindpeak? You said you're specialized in one type of tissue. Are you looking to get another type of tissue certified, and how long does it take to get this process?
So we work ourselves through the human body, if you want. Yeah, so we started with breast tissue, and there, I mean, now we're doing like lung, and next things in the pipeline are prostate as a big one, and then bladder and stomach. So the certification process alone, you need to get you need to make a validation study. You need to get your CE certificate. That takes around 6 months, I would say. Okay. And the total development cycle, so including that, and then the model development and data collection, maybe 12 months, something like that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us, and thank you for listening.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much.